11:42 a.m. The fork clattered on the linoleum, a sharp, metallic sound that made the little girl flinch. In the cacophony of the corner booth diner, the sizzle of burgers on the griddle, the low hum of conversation, the clinking of coffee cups, the sound was insignificant to everyone but her. For 9-year-old Lily, it was a thunderclap signaling the storm to come. Her foster father, Mr. Croft, did not look at her. He continued his conversation with the waitress, his smile a perfect, polished veneer. But under the table, his fingers tightened around Lily's arm, a vice of chilling strength. The pressure was precise, digging into the soft flesh just above her elbow. A secret, painful language only the two of them understood. "Clumsy," he murmured, the word a puff of cold air against the diner's warm, greasy atmosphere. His public voice was gentle, a performance for the world. His eyes, however, were chips of ice. They promised a reckoning for the dropped fork, for the small, unforgivable sin of drawing a moment's attention. Lily's gaze darted around the room, a desperate, silent plea. Her eyes snagged on a man sitting alone at the counter. He was enormous, a mountain of denim and worn leather. A thick, graying beard covered the lower half of his face, and his hands, resting on the countertop, were calloused and scarred. They looked strong enough to bend steel. On the back of his leather vest was a patch, a menacing raven with wings of iron, its claws gripping a chain. He wasn't looking at them, but she felt his presence like a low hum of electricity. He was different from the other men in the diner, the ones in their pressed shirts and tired suits. He seemed to exist outside their world of quiet desperation. He seemed real. Mr. Croft was still smiling at the waitress, ordering a slice of apple pie he would later critique with surgical cruelty. The pressure on Lily's arm increased. She needed to go to the restroom. It was her only chance. "May I be excused?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Croft's smile tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. Don't be long." He released her arm, and the sudden absence of pain was as shocking as its presence. As she slid out of the booth, her small hand, slick with sweat, fumbled in the pocket of her worn dress. Inside was a piece of paper, folded into a tiny, tight square. It was a single page torn from her school notebook, the crayon lettering a testament to a child's trembling hope. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. She walked toward the back of the diner, her path taking her directly behind the man at the counter. Her steps were small, measured. For a terrifying second, she thought she would lose her nerve. The memory of last week's punishment, a long, dark night locked in the cellar for spilling a glass of milk, flashed in her mind. But the memory of her mother's last words, a faint whisper in a sterile hospital room, was stronger. "Be brave, my Lilybug. Find the good people." She didn't know if the man with the iron raven on his back was good, but he was her only hope. As she passed his stool, she let the folded note slip from her fingers. It fluttered to the floor, landing silently beside the heel of his heavy black boot. She didn't look back. She didn't dare. She walked into the restroom, locked the door, and pressed her forehead against the cool, grimy mirror, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had sent her prayer into the world. Now all she could do was wait for an answer. The biker, whose road name was Sledge, felt the slight whisper of paper against his boot. He didn't react immediately. In his world, sudden movements attracted the wrong kind of attention. He took a slow sip of his black coffee, his eyes scanning the diner in the reflection of the chrome napkin dispenser. He saw the girl disappear into the restroom. He saw the man in the booth, the one with the expensive watch and the cruel mouth, watching her go. Sledge waited a full minute before he casually bent down, pretending to tie his bootlace. His thick fingers, surprisingly deft, plucked the small square of paper from the floor. He straightened up, palming the note. He paid for his coffee, leaving a generous tip, and walked out into the bright, indifferent afternoon sunlight. Leaning against the warm brick wall of the diner, he unfolded the note. The crayon was purple, the letters shaky but clear. "He hurts me. Please help." Below the words was an address, 1128 Hawthorne Lane. Sledge's blood ran cold. He had seen notes like this before. Too many times. He read it again, the childish script a stark contrast to the horrific plea. He looked through the diner window. Mr. Croft was tapping his fingers on the table, impatience radiating from him. The mask of the charming father was slipping. Sledge saw the hard line of his jaw, the predatory stillness in his posture. He knew that look. It was the look of a bully, a coward who fed on the fear of the small and the weak. His first instinct was a hot surge of rage, a primal urge to walk back into that diner, drag the man out into the street, and deliver the kind of justice the law so often failed to provide. But he smothered it. That was the old way. That way led to prison cells and more broken lives. His club, the Iron Ravens, had a new way, a better way. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. The phone was answered on the second ring. "Preacher," Sledge said, his voice a low rumble. "I've got a situation," he explained, the note, the girl, the man, the address. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then the calm, steady voice of his chapter president. "Where are you?" "Corner booth on Elm. They're still inside, hold position. Do not engage. Do not be seen," Preacher instructed. "Confirm the address. I want eyes on that house in 30 minutes. Quietly. No colors, no bikes. Just eyes." "Copy that," Sledge said. "Preacher, this one feels bad." "They all do, brother," Preacher replied, his voice heavy. "That's why we do what we do." The call ended. Sledge remembered the last time he'd acted on instinct alone, years ago. A kid with a black eye at a gas station. He'd called the cops. He'd known the officer who responded. The officer also knew the father, a respected local contractor. "He's a good man, Sledge. Just under a lot of stress," the cop had said with a dismissive shrug. "Kids are clumsy. You know how it is." The system had looked the other way. The Iron Ravens learned a hard lesson that day. The system only responded to overwhelming, undeniable pressure. You couldn't just knock on the door. You had to bring the whole damn house down, legally and in the light of day. So Sledge waited. He became a shadow, melting into the urban landscape, his eyes fixed on the diner's door, his heart a cold, heavy stone in his chest. Lily lived in a house that smelled of lemon-scented bleach and fear. 1128 Hawthorne Lane was a picture-perfect colonial with a manicured lawn and cheerful blue shutters. To the neighbors, Mr. Croft was a model citizen, a widower bravely raising a difficult foster child on his own. He was a pillar of the community, a generous donor to the police benevolent fund. But inside those pristine walls, the air was thick with unspoken rules and the constant threat of punishment. Lily's world was a landscape of small, concrete details that defined her captivity. It was the specific click of the lock on the outside of her bedroom door, a sound that meant she was being put away for the night, or for the day, or for however long Mr. Croft deemed necessary. It was the threadbare arm of her teddy bear, Leo, the last tangible piece of her mother she had. She would whisper her fears into his matted fur, pretending he could carry them away. It was the weight of the word ungrateful, a word Mr. Croft used like a weapon, branding her with it whenever she failed to show the proper degree of manufactured happiness. He had taken everything from her, and in return he demanded gratitude. The greatest source of Mr. Croft's power over her was the absence of her younger brother, Sammy. After their mother died, they had been separated by the foster care system. Sammy, with his bright, easy smile, had gone to a family 2 towns over. Mr. Croft held the separation over her like an executioner's axe. "They tell me your brother is so happy in his new home," he would say, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "He's thriving. It would be a shame if something were to happen. If, for instance, his sister's behavioral issues were to cause the state to reconsider his placement. You wouldn't want to ruin his life, would you, Lily?" And so she endured. She endured the cold meals left outside her locked door. She endured the long hours of chores designed to exhaust her. She endured his chilling monologues about her many failings. She did it all for Sammy, for the dream of one day seeing him again. But her mother's voice was a persistent echo in her heart. "Be brave. Find the good people. Her mother had told her stories of people who lived by a code, people for whom honor was not just a word. When she saw the biker at the diner, something in her recognized a different kind of strength, one that had nothing to do with money or reputation. The raven on his vest looked fierce, but it also looked like a guardian. It was a desperate, foolish gamble, slipping him that note. It was the act of a girl with nothing left to lose. She had planted a seed of hope in the most unlikely soil. Now, locked in her room, listening to the silence of the house, she clutched Leo and prayed that it would grow. From the seat of his nondescript sedan parked a block away from 1128 Hawthorne Lane, Sledge watched the perfect house with a growing sense of dread. He had traded his motorcycle for a borrowed car, his leather vest for a plain jacket. He was just another man on a quiet suburban street. He and two other Iron Ravens, Ghost and Doc, had established a rotating surveillance schedule. They were ghosts, their presence unfelt, their purpose unwavering. They documented everything. They saw Lily being sent out to weed the sprawling flower beds under the brutal afternoon sun, her small frame wilting with exhaustion while Mr. Croft watched from a shaded porch, sipping a tall glass of iced tea. They timed how long she was out there, 2 hours and 17 minutes with no water. A photo, taken with a long-lens camera, captured the sheen of sweat on her pale face, the weary slump of her shoulders. Later, through a sensitive microphone, they picked up the sound of Croft's voice, a sharp, angry bark from an open window. Useless. You missed a spot. Do it again. They saw the curtains in Lily's second-floor bedroom window. They were always drawn, a dark, blank eye in the cheerful facade of the house. The system continued to fail her. Doc, who had been a police detective before retiring and joining the Ravens, made an anonymous call to the state's Child Protective Services hotline. He used a burner phone, his voice calm and professional. He didn't mention the club. He presented himself as a concerned neighbor. He gave the address. He cited specific, observable instances of neglect and emotional abuse. He mentioned the excessive chores, the isolation, the yelling. The operator on the other end sounded bored. Her responses scripted. "We will log the complaint," she said, her tone flat. "An agent will assess the situation based on caseload priority." 2 days passed. The frustration among the watching Ravens grew into a cold, simmering anger. On the third day, a county-owned sedan drove slowly down Hawthorne Lane. It slowed as it passed Croft's house. The driver, a woman in a wrinkled blouse, glanced at the pristine lawn and the cheerful blue shutters. She didn't stop. She didn't get out. She just kept driving, turning the corner at the end of the block and disappearing. The system had looked, and it had looked away. Sledge gripped the steering wheel of his car, his knuckles white. The image of the CPS car driving away was a physical blow. It was proof that the walls of procedure and bureaucracy were too high, too thick. They couldn't just knock on the door anymore. They had to kick it down. They needed a catalyst, something so undeniable that even a broken system couldn't ignore it. That evening, another text went to Preacher. "No contact from CPS. Target is escalating verbal abuse. The girl looks weaker." The reply was instant. "Hold the line. He'll make a mistake." The mistake came on a Saturday afternoon. The air was thick and heavy with the promise of a thunderstorm. Lily was in the front yard, trimming the edges of the lawn with a pair of hand shears. A tedious, back-breaking task. A small, scruffy terrier from next door, a friendly dog named Buster, trotted over and began licking her face. For a fleeting moment, a genuine smile broke through Lily's carefully constructed mask of obedience. She hugged the little dog, burying her face in its warm, dusty fur. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated childhood joy. From his car down the street, Ghost captured the image with his camera. He smiled. It was the first time he had seen the girl look happy. The moment was shattered when the front door of the house flew open. Mr. Croft stood on the porch, his face contorted in a mask of rage. "What are you doing? Get that filthy animal away from you," he bellowed. Lily scrambled to her feet, her face pale with terror. She tried to shoo Buster away, but the friendly dog just wagged its tail, thinking it was a game. Croft stormed down the steps. He didn't strike Lily. He was too smart for that, at least in public. Instead, he grabbed the dog by the scruff of its neck. Buster yelped in pain and confusion. Croft ignored the sound. His eyes locked on Lily. "You see?" he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "This is what happens when you get attached to things. This is what happens when you disobey." He dragged the whimpering dog across the lawn, toward a large, windowless garden shed at the side of the house. He threw the dog inside, slammed the heavy wooden door, and slid the bolt shut. The muffled, frantic barking from within the shed was a sound of pure agony. He turned back to Lily, who stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. "Let that be a lesson to you," he said, his voice cold and final. In his car, Ghost lowered his camera, his hands shaking with fury. He keyed his radio. "Sledge document. You see that?" Their voices came back, tight with controlled rage. "We saw it. He just locked the neighbor's dog in the shed. It's got to be 100 degrees in there. This was it. This was the line." The unwritten code of the Iron Ravens was simple but absolute. They protected children and they protected animals. It was a clear, bright line that separated them from the predators of the world. An attack on an innocent, whether human or animal, was an attack on the very core of their brotherhood. This act of calculated, sadistic cruelty, designed to terrorize a child by torturing an animal, was more than just a mistake. It was a declaration of war. Ghost picked up his phone. He didn't need to elaborate. He said only 5 words to his president. "Preacher." He crossed the line. The silence on the other end was heavy, dangerous. Then, Preacher's voice, colder than any winter wind. "I hear you, brother. It's time. The Sunday service is this afternoon. 1500 hours, the code was spoken." The emotional fuse had been lit, but the explosion would not be one of chaotic violence. It would be a carefully orchestrated, disciplined detonation of truth. The time for watching from the shadows was over. It was time to bring the thunder. 1 p.m. The call went out, not as a single command, but as a cascade of text messages rippling through the network of the Iron Ravens Motorcycle Club. The message was simple, cryptic to outsiders, but a clarion call to the initiated. Sunday service. Croft Residence, 1128 Hawthorne Lane. 1,500 hours. Dress uniform, phones lit up in garages, in diners, in living rooms across 3 counties. Men stopped what they were doing, fixing a carburetor, watching a baseball game, playing with their children. They read the message, and a quiet, grim understanding settled over them. Dress uniform meant their cuts, the leather vests that were their second skin, emblazoned with the club's colors. It meant a full, formal, and public appearance. This wasn't a ride. It was a mobilization. The response was immediate. A quiet acknowledgement, "Copy," or "On my way," was all that was needed. Garage doors rumbled open, revealing rows of gleaming chrome and steel. The low, guttural cough of a V-twin engine starting broke the suburban quiet in a dozen different towns. Then another and another. It was the sound of a sleeping giant awakening. Men kissed their wives and partners, a silent exchange passing between them. There was no need for explanation. The call to a Sunday service was sacred. It meant a brother or someone under the club's protection needed them. Preacher stood in his workshop, a map spread out on his workbench, coordinating the convergence. His phone buzzed incessantly with updates. Chapter 5. Road Captain confirms 32 riders rolling from the north. Chapter 7. 45 confirmed from the east. The nomads are meeting at the gas station off the interstate. 18 strong, the numbers grew. 100. 150. Soon they were approaching 200. This was not just a chapter response. This was the full weight of the regional brotherhood. Preacher made 2 more calls. The first was to Sarah Jenkins, a tenacious local reporter who had earned the club's trust by reporting fairly on one of their charity runs. "Sarah, it's Preacher," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I have a story for you, the kind that wins awards. 1128 Hawthorne Lane. Be there at 3 o'clock sharp. Bring your camera. No questions, just be there. He knew she would come. The second call was to Marcus Thorne, a semi-retired lawyer who provided pro bono counsel to the club. Marcus, we're making a citizen's welfare check. We anticipate local law enforcement will be present. We need you on site at 1500 hours to ensure everything is done by the book. Thorne's response was calm and immediate. I'll be there. The plan was a three-pronged assault, not of violence, but of exposure. The overwhelming presence of the club would draw attention. The press would ensure the story was told. And the law would provide the procedural framework to make it all stick. Out on the highways, the streams of motorcycles began to merge, forming massive, orderly columns. They rode 2 by 2, a river of black leather and chrome flowing steadily toward a single point on the map. The sound was no longer individual engines, but a single unified roar, a deep, resonant thunder that rolled across the landscape, a promise of the storm about to break over one quiet house on Hawthorne Lane. 2:58 p.m. Hawthorne Lane was the definition of suburban tranquility. Children's bicycles lay on pristine lawns. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically, casting rainbows in the afternoon sun. The only sign of trouble was the muffled, weakening barking still coming from Mr. Croft's garden shed. Then came the sound. It started as a distant, low hum, almost imperceptible, like the vibration of a far-off freight train. But it grew steadily, swelling from a hum to a rumble, a deep, chest-rattling roar that seemed to make the very air vibrate. Windows began to tremble in their frames. Residents looked up from their gardening, their faces etched with confusion. The sound was directional, organized, and it was getting closer. Then they appeared. Turning the corner at the end of the block was not a chaotic swarm of bikers, but a disciplined, almost military formation. Nearly 200 motorcycles, moving in perfect 2 by 2 columns, filled the street from curb to curb. The procession was led by Preacher, his face set like granite. They moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, the chrome on their bikes glinting in the sun. They didn't rev their engines or shout. Their power was in their numbers and their silence. With practiced precision, the riders began to peel off, parking legally along both sides of the street. They filled every available space for 3 blocks in either direction, a steel and leather cordon cutting off the world. The engines were cut, and the sudden, profound silence was more intimidating than the noise had been. In unison, the riders dismounted. They were men of all ages and sizes, but they moved as one. They didn't step onto Croft's lawn. They didn't block his driveway. They simply stood on the public sidewalk or leaned against their bikes, their arms crossed, forming a silent, imposing perimeter. They just watched the house. Doors opened up and down the street. Neighbors emerged, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. They had seen Mr. Croft as a respectable, if stern, man. They were now witnessing something that shattered that perception. The front door of 1128 Hawthorne Lane opened. Mr. Croft stepped out, his face a mask of arrogant indignation. "What is the meaning of this? This is private property," he shouted, his voice tight with panic. He saw the sheer, overwhelming number of men in leather vests, their gazes fixed on him. His bluster began to crack. At that moment, a car pulled up, and Sarah Jenkins, the reporter, got out, a professional-grade camera already on her shoulder. She began filming, her lens capturing the beads of sweat on Croft's forehead, the way his eyes darted from face to face, searching for a weakness and finding none. Preacher stepped forward, stopping at the edge of the public sidewalk. He was a dozen feet from Croft, but the distance felt like a mile-wide chasm. "We're not on your property, sir," Preacher said, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily in the quiet air. "We are a group of concerned citizens, and we're here to wait." The arrival of 2 police cruisers, sirens off but lights flashing, broke the tense standoff. They had been summoned by a flood of 911 calls from the bewildered neighbors. 2 officers, a veteran sergeant named Miller and a younger patrolman, got out of their car, their expressions wary. They were massively outnumbered, facing a sea of men who looked like they ate trouble for breakfast. But the men were doing nothing illegal. They were just standing there. Preacher met Sergeant Miller halfway up the driveway, his hands open and visible. The Iron Raven's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, was right beside him. "Sergeant," Preacher said, his tone respectful but firm. "My name is John Preacher Riley. This is our legal counsel, Mr. Thorne. We are here to peacefully ensure that a welfare check is performed on the child residing at this address." Lily Miller was tense. "This isn't the way to do it, Mr. Riley. You're intimidating the whole neighborhood." "Intimidation is not our intent," Thorne interjected smoothly. "Our presence is merely to bear witness. We have reason to believe a child is in imminent danger. We have documented our concerns, and we would like to share them with you." Preacher handed Miller a thick manila folder. Inside was the surveillance log, dates, times, and detailed notes of every observation. There were photographs of Lily doing grueling yard work, her small face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. There was a transcript of the anonymous CPS call Doc had made, and a note about the agency's failure to act. There was even a high-quality photo of Mr. Croft dragging the neighbor's dog to the shed. As Miller flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from annoyance to grim concern. Croft, seeing the exchange, began to shout from his porch. "This is harassment. I'm a respected member of this community. They are slandering me." Just then, a second-story window on the house slid open. It was Lily's room. She was too small to be seen clearly, but her small hands appeared, pushing something through the opening. Her teddy bear, Leo, tumbled out, falling softly onto the thick grass of the lawn below. It seemed like a small, insignificant act, but Sledge, standing near the front of the crowd, knew it was a signal. He walked calmly onto the lawn, the first and only raven to step onto the property, and picked up the bear. Tied around its neck with a piece of yarn was another folded note, this one written hastily in pencil. He untied it and read it aloud, his voice booming across the silent yard. "He locked Buster in the hot shed. He won't give him water. Please help the dog." The revelation hung in the air, electric and undeniable. It was specific. It was current. It was a clear, actionable allegation of felony animal cruelty. It gave the police everything they needed. All eyes, the bikers, the neighbors, the reporters, turned to Sergeant Miller. The pressure was immense, a physical weight in the humid air. He was no longer just a cop dealing with a disturbance. He was a public official on camera, holding documented evidence, with nearly 200 witnesses waiting to see if he would uphold his oath. The system had been cornered. Sergeant Miller's face was a grim mask. He was a 20-year veteran of the force. He knew a political and legal minefield when he saw one. But he also knew his duty. He couldn't walk away. He couldn't dismiss it. He looked from the note in Sledge's hand to the garden shed, then to Mr. Croft, whose face had gone pale. "Sir, I need you to open that shed," Miller said, his voice now carrying the full authority of the law. "That's my private property. You have no right." Croft sputtered. "I have a credible report of an animal in distress, which gives me exigent circumstances to enter your property to render aid," Miller stated, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Open it." Now, when Croft didn't move, Miller nodded to his partner. The officer swung the door open. A wave of suffocating heat rolled out. Lying on the floor, panting weakly, was Buster, the terrier. He was severely dehydrated, his eyes glazed, but he was alive. That was all Miller needed. "You're under arrest for aggravated animal cruelty," he told Croft, who seemed to deflate, the last of his arrogant defiance draining away. As the officer cuffed him, Miller turned and walked to the house. "We're clearing the residence to ensure there are no other victims." He and his partner entered the home. A few moments later, they emerged with Lily. The little girl was blinking against the bright sunlight, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She saw the crowd, the police cars, the man who had been her tormentor being placed in the back of a cruiser. Her eyes scanned the sea of leather-clad men, and then she saw him, Sledge. He was standing by the porch, his helmet in his hand. Her expression changed. The fear melted away, replaced by a dawning, fragile hope. She broke away from the officer holding her hand and ran across the grass. She didn't make a sound. She just ran, a small, determined blur, and threw her arms around Sledge's legs, burying her face against the rough leather of his vest. Sledge knelt, his large, scarred hands hesitating for a moment before gently resting on her back. The image was devastatingly powerful. The massive, grizzled biker and the tiny, frail girl, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in her world. Sarah Jenkins's camera captured it all. The photo would be on the front page of the paper the next morning, an image that spoke 1,000 words about justice, protection, and the failure of a system that had left a child to be saved by the very men society so often judged and dismissed. The story exploded. Sarah Jenkins's report, complete with the dramatic footage of the standoff and the powerful photo of Lily and Sledge, went viral overnight. It was picked up by national news outlets, the narrative of the silent, disciplined bikers forcing a corrupt system to act, capturing the public imagination. The fallout for the local authorities was swift and brutal. An internal investigation was launched into the county's Child Protective Services Department. The logged but ignored call from Doc became Exhibit A. Subpoenas were issued, and records were unsealed. It was revealed that Mr. Croft was not just a foster parent. He was a major financial contributor to the campaign of a county commissioner who had direct oversight of the CPS budget. A pattern of his previous foster children being removed for behavioral issues just before they were old enough to speak out clearly was uncovered. The systemic rot was laid bare for all to see. The CPS director was fired. The commissioner was forced to resign in disgrace, facing a separate ethics investigation. Lily was placed in emergency protective custody, but she was not alone. The Iron Ravens, through their lawyer Marcus Thorne, filed a motion to be recognized as interested parties in her case, ensuring she would not be lost in the bureaucratic shuffle again. They became her advocates, her guardians. Sledge visited her every day at the temporary shelter, bringing her books and art supplies. He never asked about what happened in that house. He just sat with her, a quiet, reassuring presence, until she felt safe enough to start talking on her own. Croft's legal battle was short. Faced with the mountain of evidence and the public outcry, he accepted a plea bargain, a multi-year prison sentence for animal cruelty and child endangerment. His pristine house on Hawthorne Lane was sold, the cheerful blue shutters a mocking reminder of the darkness they had concealed. Justice was delivered, not in the shadows with fists and threats, but in a well-lit courtroom, broadcast for the entire world to see. The Iron Ravens had not thrown a single punch, but they had landed a knockout blow against corruption and indifference, all by holding the line and trusting that the truth, when exposed to the light, was the most powerful weapon of all. 6 months later, the thunder of the Iron Ravens' arrival had faded, but its echo was reshaping the community. The scandal had forced a complete overhaul of the regional child welfare system. A new civilian oversight committee was established, tasked with reviewing CPS cases and holding the agency accountable. In a move that shocked the old guard, one of the seats on that committee was permanently designated for a representative from a community advocacy group. The Iron Ravens, working with other volunteer organizations, had already filled that role. They created a new initiative, Leo's Watch, named after Lily's teddy bear. It was a network of vetted volunteers, retired cops, teachers, nurses, who provided quiet, lawful surveillance and documentation for children flagged as high risk. They became the eyes and ears for a new, more responsive child advocacy task force, ensuring that no child's plea for help would ever again be met with the silence of a car driving by. Lily was thriving. She was living with a new foster family, a warm, loving couple who were also fostering her younger brother, Sammy. The Iron Ravens network had located him within weeks, and Marcus Thorne had fast-tracked the legal process to reunite them. The first time Lily saw her brother again, she held on to him so tightly she forgot how to speak, her tears of joy saying everything that words could not. She was in therapy, slowly healing from the wounds of her past. But her true family was the brotherhood of bikers who had answered her call. They were a constant, steady presence in her new life. When she joined the local soccer team, a quiet row of leather-clad men would occupy a section of the bleachers at every game, their deep voices a rumbling chorus of encouragement. They were her guardians, her unlikely uncles, her proof that good people existed. In the corner booth diner, a new picture hung on the wall next to the faded photos of local sports teams. It was Sarah Jenkins's iconic shot of Lily, smiling for the first time, standing between the towering figures of Sledge and Preacher. The diner's owner had mounted it himself, adding a small, hand-painted plaque beneath it. Some angels have wings. Others have engines. The story ended not with a roar, but with a quiet scene in a sun-drenched park. Lily and Sammy were laughing, chasing after a scruffy terrier named Buster, whom her new family had adopted. From a nearby bench, Sledge watched them, the hard lines of his weathered face softened by a gentle smile. The rumble of his motorcycle, parked at the curb, was no longer a sound of intimidation or rebellion. It was the sound of a promise kept, a low, steady heartbeat of protection that had restored a community's faith not in its flawed institutions, but in the enduring power of a little girl's courage and the unwavering code of those who chose to listen.